Okay, so level 1 group. This is just for you. Your next assessment comprises 2 parts. And the first part is fish and chips. The second part is a stir-fry dish. But we're going to start with fish and chips. And really basic ingredients in front of me, some of which I've prepped already. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to make the batter in a minute. So I've got the batter ingredients right in front of me here. I'm just going to talk you through them. I've got 3 pots here. I know that doesn't look like it, but this is a lager. Okay, we could use beer, but we're using lager today. That's part of the batter ingredients. And we've also got 2 small pots of self-raising flour. Okay, must be self-raising flour. And in this pot here I've got some turmeric, which is a spice. It's not really there for any flavour, it's just for a tiny bit of colour. And I've also got some yeast as well, so some dried yeast, just a sachet of, and that's just going to add a bit of aeration to the batter as well, make it slightly more bubbly. Okay, over on this tray I've got a nice fillet of fish. There's no bones in there at all. That's going to be prepped already for you, so you don't need to do anything with that at all. And then I've got some potatoes, which I've made into chips. Okay, so I've squared off the potatoes and I've cut them into even sized strips. I shouldn't need to show you that at this stage of your qualification. We've done that so many times right at the beginning. So I've got 6 pieces there, sort of quite thick, chunky chips. I've also got a piece of lemon, which I've cut into a wedge. Okay, that's just for garnish and a little bit of flavour over the top of the fish at the end. So we're going to start with the making of the batter. Really straightforward. We put the lager beer into the bowl. I've also got a whisk as well. And into the beer we put the flour. Okay, now this has already been sieved, so there's no lumps in there. And that first pot I'm just going to whisk in to the beer, and you can see that's still really quite thin. Okay, so whisk it really well, get rid of all the lumps, and then we can put the second pot in, but I'm only going to put half of it in to start off with, because I'm just going to gauge the thickness of the batter as we go along. Okay, so I can see that that's still quite thin. So I'm going to put the rest of that flour in, or most of it, and I'm waiting till I get the right thickness. So whisk again, it's starting to get thicker. I can see that because I can see the whisk trails or the whisk marks a lot better. Still not thick enough for me, so let's go in with the rest of that, and hopefully that's going to be then the correct thickness. And to test the thickness, I'm going to dip my finger in it, and if it coats my finger really easily, well then that should be a good sign that that's going to be okay to coat the fish. So in with the finger, and you can see that sort of coats my finger quite well. Okay, so that's probably just about the right thickness. I'll just dip in the rest of that flour that's left in there, just to make sure you use it all up. And then last of all, I'm going to put a good pinch of this turmeric in there, and it's just going to change the colour ever so slightly, but it shouldn't add any flavour. Okay, I don't want the flavour of the turmeric, just the colour. And you can see how it just changes the colour ever so slightly. I'll just pop a little bit more in, just to give it a little bit more yellowness. And that's our batter ready to use, apart from last thing, a really good pinch of salt in there as well. And apologies, I forgot about my trusty yeast. Just tear the top off, just sprinkle that in and whisk it in. And I'm just going to leave that just to rest, just for a few minutes, to let the yeast start to do its job and produce a little bit of CO2 in that batter, just to give it a few extra bubbles. Okay, so I've just had the chips on a piece of paper towel just to get rid of any extra moisture that there might be in there, because we don't want the fat to spit at us. So the chips then can go into the chip basket, being really careful that we've not got any water on the chips, as I said, or else it'll drip into the oil and it'll spit at us. I've set the fryer at about 125, 130 degrees, and all we're going to do with this first batch of chips here is we're going to blanch them. So we're not going to colour them, we're just going to cook them through so that the centre's nice and fluffy but there's no colour on the outside. Then a little bit later on we're going to turn the heat up on the fryer and we're going to re-immerse them in the oil so that they become really nice and brown and crispy, and golden and crispy. Okay, so into the oil, and we're just going to let them sit in that oil, and they'll just start to simmer really gently, and they'll cook in there probably for about 7 to 8 minutes, and we'll take them out and test them to see if the centre's cooked. Okay, so the chips have been in there for probably about 8 to 10 minutes, something like that, and I'm just going to lift them out onto some paper just to drain them. I would suggest that you don't use your fingers. I've got asbestos fingers. These are really quite hot, but I can't feel the pain, you see, because I'm quite hard. Okay, and I'm just going to test these with a knife, and as you can see, the knife passes through them fairly easily, so it's not meeting any resistance at all. That's a good sign that they're going to be nice and fluffy in the centre. So we're just going to leave those there just to drain. You can see the oil comes off them. We're just going to leave them there for just a few minutes until we're ready for the next part.